Hey, Chris, thank you so much for the turnaround. We're taking a look at, from one of our concepts, the this sort of ominous Paltech large, I don't know, like it's sort of like an ominous surveillance building, something like a giant sensor array, not entirely sure. So here's what our concept was. And before I go into the other details, let me just some of the things I really liked about this, and I think you captured some of this here. Some of this is about mood and color, and some of it is also about I think, when we get into doing shadowing, that I like that in the concepts here, like there's this kind of idea, and I'm totally projecting this, right? But there's this idea of the structure is a bit wider than in yours, and I think I like this idea that it has this, like, it's a little bit wider and more bulbous on top, so then it casts this extra shadowing underneath. And in addition to that, the underparts of the building would be darker in terms of like segmentation. They show kind of recessed machinery, techno noise, things like that. So, and coming back in to look at this again, I really enjoyed. I think this kind of like this conduit of power lines that kind of wrap through with these here. I think you captured this a bit as well in the middle design. And then this is again kind of shadowing, but I like this interesting. It doesn't make 100% sense, but the geometry, it kind of have the sharp face that comes to an angle, and I think that's what really captures a chunk of what the structure looks like with the angles and the idea of how it's proportionate. Again, a bit more bulbous, maybe we're a little more angular, and definitely overall like a more I think menacing in terms of its geometry. So, and then a couple other bits here with like the undershadowing from its own structure, and we have these conduit bit things here, conduit bit things here. So from your side, I think the middle one is closest to that. So I used a few words here as just thinking about it. Bigger, smooth structure, less segmentation, less techno noise. I want this thing to feel like a giant monolith. And that if, like, we have a couple of these really big parts of segmentation, like this here, right? I think that can work. Again, I think that there's something I really like, that we don't have a lot of techno segmentation noise on these big faces, but we have this one kind of guiding thing that comes down, and then it draws your eye into these really cool like geometric grooves for I think for just what's going on with this building. So it's got that kind of big brother watching feeling. There's something really ominous about the eye, and so I came down here and I took a look again, and I think here there's just too much geometry. Like it's very clean geometry, and I think there's something fine with that, but we're not quite there. So I want to see a couple iterations on the eye bits, and so it's kind of what I was thinking here, right? So again, this is also about mood and feel, this kind of alien, like very very T800 kind of flavor to it. And I like the idea that there's this kind of darker inner area that supports the machinery of the eye, and you don't quite see what that is. And granted, that's gonna be some tech noise for us when we do that. This idea that we have this kind of big screen sensor thing that is definitely like glowing red. This thing is going to be ominous, right? Like I want, like, the rest of the structure won't be blinking neon. It'll have some accents, right? Like almost like it's pulsing with the structure itself. But I think that giant sensor is like the eye of Sauron almost, right? Like that's kind of like the flavor. And I picked up just a little like sort of dragon eye here. I like these, and it could be more in the iris itself, right? For the eye itself, so it's not so round. But I like playing with these shapes that we have, maybe like the underside of the, like almost like a serpent eye or a reptile slitted eye here. So I want to kind of like bring those things together. And then for some of the outer machinery, I want us to, around the eye, feel like a shutter, right? I want it to feel like this thing could blink mechanically. Maybe who knows what it does, right? So, but I was like, let's see if we can play with those elements, bring them together. I think that'll be really interesting. And by keeping these around the eye itself, this big sensor, I think that will also pull that like the visual noise into the eye. And I think that'll be really cool. And granted, the good news is this thing's going to be big. These are big on screen, right? In the world, and it's pretty much just this is like a kind of like this is sort of the it's like a giant laser protection grid system. So this is sort of like the like it's like almost like it's a Sentry Defense Tower. It's also a spy on the populace. It's got all some other bits. I mentioned this a little bit here. I think we're a little bit too narrow, so let's widen this out a little bit more. And I think that's, as I'm responding to this here, kind of looking at the differences. I think that's again, the eye is probably the biggest piece as far as the characteristics go. And yes, I think we're a little bit too narrow. And then let's see here. So wider. Pardon me. We talked about it, how it should feel, and then the depth, right? Like I already talked about that a little bit here. So, and then in general, we're gonna have less neon lights and accents in this case. So I want to try to hit a little bit more of this, like, we got a little bit of techno noise, but it's got, what do you say? It's kind of industrial. It's kind of cold. It's definitely, a little bit of brutalism in the I think the geometry. Like this is almost like, not only does it have this function we talked about with it being a sentry, but it's also kind of like a status symbol of Paltech's, like a reminder, like that this obelisk, this giant like monument, that it's like a monument of like technology. So it's got a bit of that minimalism to it. So again, trying to go with that feeling. So I think this is going to be a really nice little piece, because it's going to catch the eye as we come through. And this is going to set kind of the tone for the laser grid area. I know Dimitri had said that he was thinking with the reflector mech that we might use that in this area in place of the laser grids, but I'm not entirely sure that's the case yet. So I'm still thinking very much maybe a laser maze. I don't know, we'll let's get this together and we can figure out what we're going to do after that. So, so we said ominous, more depth. And then, yeah, so I think, again, you had this here. I kind of like the outer segments here that you're coming into. I think they kind of flush a little bit too much. We talked about the proportions, a little more depth, and which I see that you've kind of got coming through into here, which is great, right? I'm enjoying that you've got a bit of that, like, I don't think I think it's too recessed right now, but we have these 90-degree angles or 45-degree angles ish on the fronts there. Other than that, let's see. So up here, I think you're starting to capture some of that, like that. I like that there's a little bit more form here. I think we can play with this a little bit and see how this large panel, almost like a crazy shutter thing, could be happening there. Again, I think that you know what, I'm gonna remove this. I think that's a little bit closer there. It's almost like the opposite of in the concept here on the right side. So let's work on those panels. I think kind of up in the top here in both of those. Yeah, I think you're it's coming along. I think it's close there. So also, I think, when I'm looking at this again, I like that you have like this segmentation here. That is feeling pretty good too. Same thing on the other side, right? So yeah, I think that's great. I'm excited that we're spinning this thing up. So thank you very much, and I'll talk to you soon.